Hey everyone, welcome back to the American Justice Podcast Q&A for episode 9. We hope everybody is staying safe. Not necessarily staying home anymore, staying safe. Scott, how are you doing over there on your side of Big D?
At least not in the big state of Texas. I mean, we are open for business.
Yeah, I actually we went and found a Snappy Salads that was open this weekend. I was really craving a salad. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And we went over to White Rock Lake to find a quiet little spot to, eat dinner. And there's no such thing. There was no parking, no parking. No, I mean there were people everywhere.
Wow.
So back to business, I guess. More power to them. I'm not going to be one, but more power to them.
Right. Did you eat with your mask on?
I did not eat with my mask on.
I actually have kind of a funny story. I'm used to when I'm wearing masks, being at work, right? So
Yeah.
I don't have time to like eat or drink or anything like that. So when I started having to wear a mask, going out into public or being someplace where, let's say I'm going somewhere and I get a snack or something like that. The first time that I had the mask on in public, I had a drink in my hand, and I literally went to drink it and forgot that I had the mask on, and I spilled it all over myself.
Oh man. Yeah,
I was like,
I got a feeling this is going to be the norm for a while. You might as well be fashionable about it. I've ordered a couple of masks that have like a wolf face on them, and
nice.
got some Dallas Stars masks. So yeah, if this is going to be a thing, you might as well be fashionable about it.
That would actually be kind of cool if like we had if they opened up the sports games and stuff and everybody had like,
Yeah.
went to the Dallas Stars game and everybody had a Dallas Stars mask on. That'd be kind of cool.
That would be cool. That would be first 500 fans through the door get a free Dallas Stars mask.
Yeah, awesome. That'd be awesome. I'm
Yeah,
just waiting
I'm
for
sure
my
that.
Texas Rangers, man. I'm so like fiending baseball right now. It's crazy.
I know. Have you ordered any Texas Rangers masks?
I saw one on Facebook and I went to order it and they were charging like $25 for one mask. I was
Yeah.
like, no, thanks. I'll wear my
Yeah.
hospital mask.
Yeah. People are going to get away with whatever they can get away with right now.
Exactly.
It's just absolutely crazy. Well, let's jump right into some questions here. Let's
All
go.
right.
Okay, this first question comes from Debbie in Plano. Good old Debbie.
Hey, Debbie.
Thank you so much for everything you do. You pay attention to us every week. We really
Yes.
appreciate it.
I'm glad you're following this story.
Yeah, Debbie says, I think it would have taken over 2 hours for Brandon to do everything. If the real killers worked together, it could have been done somewhat quicker. Do you know if the time of death occurred during the accounted for time frame? Even if it did, 14 minutes would be impossible.
Well, yeah, I agree. 14. I mean, obviously, when I first saw that, narrowed it down to these 14 minutes. I was like, there's just no way. The problem is that they really were not able to narrow down a time of death at all, as far as medically or forensically, because it had been 2 days since they found the bodies. They were in a relatively climate-controlled environment, so there was no bugs or any stuff like that to try to figure it out that way. So medically, they weren't really able to do it. They were able to figure out that Dennis and Norma were alive after 9 or up until 9:30 at night. They didn't report to work the next morning, so it was assumed that they were dead sometime between 9:30 p.m. and let's say 6 or 7 a.m., which makes sense. We're definitely not arguing that. Is it possible that they could have been held hostage for a day or, just sitting on the couch at gunpoint or something like that? Yeah, I mean, it's possible, but it's not probable, right? So that's the only way that we've really been able to come up with a time of death. So if that's the case, if someone showed up to the house after 9:30, let's say it's 10:30, 11, 12, whatever, they would have until 6 o'clock the next morning to clean up and do whatever they wanted. That's why I was making such a big deal about how much the bathroom was cleaned up. It was cleaned up so well that there was literally not one molecule of blood or DNA found in that bathroom. And if the killer or killers are covered in blood so much that they're dripping blood all the way to the bathroom, then you just have to assume that there was blood all over the bathroom. It was either on the door handle and on the floor and on the sink and all of that. And then whoever got done cleaning up went back and cleaned up the bathroom. We haven't gotten into the part of it yet where we talk about the water that Ranger Collins found in the bathtub and in the sink. But basically that shows that there was somebody there within 12 or 13 hours of them finding the bodies. So that's why it's kind of theorized. We'll get into this a few episodes down the road, but it's kind of theorized that the person or persons that did the crime came back the next night and actually cleaned up. And of course, we know that Brandon had a rock solid alibi all the way from about 11 o'clock on.
All right, Debbie from Plano, thank you. I know you can accomplish a lot in 14 minutes. Hell, most people's children were probably conceived in less than 14 minutes. But I don't think you can do everything that they're claiming he did in 14 minutes.
That's one of the reasons that I went through and listed everything that not only the prosecution contends that he did, but that was proved forensically had to have been done. Like I said, especially with finding no blood in his car or anything. Even if he just walked through the bloody floor on the way out the door, he's still going to get some DNA on the floorboard of the truck. And they absolutely checked that and found 0 DNA in either one of those trucks. So it's just impossible.
All right, Debbie from Plano, thank you for your question.
Thank you, Debbie.
Next one, we are going to jump to the phone. Man, it's been a while since we've had one of these.
Yeah.
Just a second. Yeah. So, yeah, people are actually calling the phone.
It's about time.
Remember
Come
phones.
on, people. Call us. Leave a voicemail.
All right, here we go.
Hey, Scott. Hey, Derick. Thanks, guys, for covering this case. I'm getting super into it. It's so crazy. Okay, so my question is about the barn. How much stuff was in this barn or building or whatever it is? Because I don't know about you, but when I go in the garage just to move some stuff around, it takes me almost an hour just to get stuff from one side of the garage to the other. How did they think that Brandon was able to move so much stuff? I don't get it. But anyway, that just bothered me. I think my first estimate was like 45 minutes, maybe an hour for all those things. But I don't know, just curious. Anyway, my name's Brandy, and I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. Feel free to use my voice. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
All right, Brandy from Birmingham. Thank you so much for calling in and asking your question. She wants to know about the barn.
Well, we'd all like to know about the barn, Chad. The problem is that there was no video documentation or any photo documentation of that barn at the time that all of this happened. So we don't know exactly what it looked like at the time of the murders. The only video that we have is when the sword was found 2.5 years later. They finally decided to break out a video camera, and they went and videotaped that. The only problem with that is there had been a leak in the house we're talking 2.5 years later. There was a leak in the house. Everything from the house was moved out to the barn, and then everything from the barn was moved back to the house after it was fixed. And the contents of this barn had actually been moved back and forth a couple times. We didn't talk about that during the episode, but we'll probably talk about that more when we start talking about the trial. So we don't know what it looked like at the time. So the only thing that we have really is Detective Gibson's description of it at trial. And that's what we played in the episode when basically he said, there was just so much. We just couldn't go through it all. And of course, Catherine Ferguson was, and rightly so, pretty indignant about the fact that, wait a second, you don't know how to work a broom. You don't know how to move some boxes around. You don't know how to use trash bag, put some stuff in some trash bags.
And Mr. Guerrero asked you that some areas of the barn, quote unquote, weren't accessible?
Yes.
They weren't accessible only because you didn't make an effort to gain access. Isn't that correct?
Not necessarily.
Well, was there a locked door to keep you from getting in the barn?
No.
Was it just boxes on the floor, piled, stacked up in a stall?
There were boxes on the floor. There was debris in the stalls to the point that debris almost overrode the stalls.
All right. Did that debris weigh 2,000 to 3,000 pounds?
Collectively, it's possible it could have. There was a lot.
Was it all glued together in one big lump?
No.
All right. Do you know how to work a broom?
Yes.
And a dustpan?
Yes.
Do you know how to fill trash bags?
Yes.
So if you had wanted to gain access to those stalls, you could have done it.
Taking everything out and going through every single thing, it's possible.
Did you see anything in there that would have made it physically impossible for you to inventory the contents of the barn October 22nd, 2005?
I don't believe it could have all been done on October, on that specific day.
Okay. It may have taken a day or two, correct?
Yes.
So it didn't make sense that there was, this double homicide, capital murder investigation. And remember, this was the place that Randall Lunds, the next door neighbor, had seen Brandon. So they know for 100% fact that Brandon was at the house doing something like moving stuff around or moving the car, whatever Randall Lund saw him doing. So they know he was there. You would think that would be a pretty significant place to check, like that's going to be the place that you would check more than anything, I would think. I mean, you've got a next door neighbor that's there seeing your prime suspect moving stuff around, and you just have to kind of assume that he was doing something nefarious since he's your number one suspect. So why would you not go all through the house and go all through the barn looking for something that he would have supposedly hid there? Personally, I think my opinion is that they did go through the barn and they did clear it, not finding any weapons. But they couldn't say that when they found the weapon there 2.5 years later. They had to have the theory that Brandon put it there because he'd been in jail for 2.5 years at that point. So that's just my opinion. I'm not, who knows if that's actually what happened or not. But that's just what from looking at all the evidence, looking at all the reports. It just doesn't make sense that they wouldn't go through that barn with a fine-tooth comb.
All right. Brandy from Birmingham. Thank you very much for calling in, and thank you for your question. Just a reminder to everyone else, telephone calls are still an exceptional form of media. You can call us, and if you do call us, ask a question, we'll play your voice on the air. Just make sure that you say in the recording that it's okay to use your voice, just like good old Brandy from Birmingham did.
And what is that?
Right.
What is that phone number, Chad?
Man, why you got to ask me technical questions for? 972-942-0444. I got my cheat sheets up today, man.
All right, very nice. Good job.
All right, here. We're going to move on to question 3. Question 3 comes from Randy from Vancouver, Washington. Man, that place is nice.
Washington.
I love it there. We have Vancouver, Washington, right there on the right there outside of Portland on the Oregon-Washington state border, where they're fighting murder hornets right now.
Wow. Oh, yeah. I heard about that. I don't even want to get started on that.
What the hell, man? They have wings, and they don't care about international borders. They can go where they want.
That would make me want to quarantine more than a virus would.
Yeah, exactly. Freaking murder hornets. All right. Here we go. Randy from Vancouver. Here we go.
Randy, what's up?
I lost track of all the calls and the missing phone records. It's really confusing coming from so many different sources. Can you explain it a little more about the multiple sources? Okay, Randy, we're going to jump right on to the answer of that question just as soon as we come back from a break. Stay tuned.
C. Derick Miller is an author, producer, and gonzo journalist from the conservative community of Greenville, Texas. Sam Cloud Miller is a graphic artist and a liberal civil rights activist from Austin, Texas. Combine those two and what do you have? Magic. Recorded in the Bishop Arts District of Dallas, it's a podcast that is sure to never disappoint. They talk about books, film, music, today's topics, and life in general. Even though they may disagree on the topics from time to time, they'll always kiss and make up. It's a practice that America needs to relearn, don't you think? No filters, no scripts, and no schedule. Catch the Butterflies Make Me Angry podcast on Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, and YouTube. Peace to the peaceful, truth to the masses, hell to the tyrants. Get all the details at cderickmiller.com.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the American Justice Podcast Q&A for episode 9. We had a question from Randy in Vancouver, Washington. I'm going to read the question again, and I'm going to do it as promised in my Brooklyn Jew voice from last week. Okay. I lost track of all the calls and the missing phone records. It's really confusing coming from so many different sources. Can you explain it a little more about the multiple sources? There you go. Scott, take us to the board, man.
I don't think that I feel like we're not making as much of a big deal. I mean, we're like venturing outside of me sitting behind a table. Like, this is a big deal, man. We are out here in the elements at the board. We have gone to the board. We're John Madden, man. We are going to the diagram, but anyways.
Boom.
I guess I'm just making a bigger deal out of it than it is. But this is actually kind of a often request that I get from people that I talk to about the case outside of the podcast or whatever, and they kind of say the same thing. It was basically, there's so many phone records and there's so many different times and blah, 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 and all this stuff that it's hard to keep track of everything. And so I'm going to try to go through it kind of quickly, kind of, as a general overview, but still try to show that it's, what it was at the time. So the thing is, we know that that Brandon, the time in question, all right? So we'll put time in question is basically 9:30 to 11 o'clock, right? So we have 9:30. That's when we know the Woodruffs are alive. Okay, and then 11 o'clock, that's when Brandon meets up with Robert at Denny's. All right, so the thing is, from outside of this window, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what Brandon did after 11. It doesn't matter what Brandon did before 9:30. So, there's all the talk about Ranger Collins saying he left at 6:30, he left at 7, he left at 7. That doesn't matter. What matters is what was going on between 9:30 and 11, okay? So, we know that at 9:41 p.m., Brandon and Morgan Lee, his girlfriend, talked for 3.5 minutes. So we'll put Brandon and Morgan, 3.5 minutes. All right, so that takes us to about, we'll just say 9:45. Okay, so the prosecution says, and they accept, that the Woodruffs were alive up until 9:45 when Brandon's talking to his girlfriend. They say a lot of different things, but they're not actually alleging that Brandon's killing his parents while he's on the phone with his girlfriend. So we know up until 9:45, we know that they're still alive, okay? Then at 9:49 p.m., Brandon talks to Robert for 1 minute. And Robert says that he talked to him at 9:49, and he basically said to him, hey, I'm leaving Denton. I'm going to Denny's. We need to meet at Denny's. We need to meet halfway. So 9:49, Brandon talks to Rob. All right. So 9:49 p.m., Brandon talks to Robert. All right, so that takes us to 9:50. So the prosecution is even saying that yes, at 9:50, the Woodruffs are still alive. Okay? Now, where we have to back up here is with the first phone record that the forensically is turned over. The first one that happens to show up in the phone records that were actually turned over was 10:46 p.m. So we'll say that that's the first recorded call. All right, and this is at a cell tower in Mesquite, Texas. Sorry for the bad writing. All right, so in Mesquite, Texas, Brandon's at a cell tower. Google says the drive time between the Heath house and that cell tower is 19 minutes. So that means that the latest Brandon could have left the Heath house was 10:27 p.m. We'll say Brandon had to leave Heath. Okay, so we got so far. 10:27 is the latest that Brandon can leave the Heath house in order to get to this cell tower. Okay. How many minutes does it take to drive between Heath and Roy City? Because remember, there's no way that Brandon went directly from Roy City to this cell tower because Randall Lunn's, the one that the prosecution's putting so much faith into, Randall Lunn says, I saw Brandon between 10 and 11 p.m. So it had to be at least 10 p.m., no later than 11 p.m. So if he's going to be seen at 10:27 in order to get to this cell tower, that means that the latest that he can leave the Roy City house is 10:04 because it takes 23 minutes to drive from Roy City to Heath. So if Brandon literally at 9:50 hung up with Robert and then did all those things that we talked about, shot and stabbed both of his parents, cleaned up the bathroom, levitated across the living room, all that stuff, then he would have had to have left by 10:04 to get to the Heath house by 10:27, and then to get to the cell tower by 10:46. So that means basically that he would have literally just showed up at Heath, waved at Randall Lunn's, and then turned around and walked off, which the prosecution isn't even alleging. They're alleging that he spent all this time there putting the sword underneath all these tons and tons of boxes that were there. So basically what that does is, so 9:50 to 10:04 is how many minutes? 14 minutes. So even according to the prosecution's theory, Brandon only has 14 minutes to commit this crime. Does that make sense? Does that kind of lay it out a little bit more simpler? Like this is what the prosecution's saying. Now, we will talk about when we get into trial, these times are actually called into question because there are some other phone calls and stuff like that. But this is what the prosecution is theorizing. So even if the prosecution is completely 100% correct, Brandon had 14 minutes to commit these crimes. Now, here's the last thing I'll say about this, and this is what we were talking about with the phone records. If Brandon's phone records were turned over to the police and then turned over to the defense, we would know by cell tower technology where Brandon was at this 9:41 call. Because this 9:41 call with Morgan, if Brandon is at the Heath house, there's no way to travel to Roy City and back in order for Randall Lunn's to see him between 10 and 11. Because remember, Randall Lunn's could not have seen Brandon at 9:41, could not have seen him at 9:49. He had to be between 10 and 11 p.m. because Randall Lunn says, remember, that he watched his shows, and as soon as the 10 o'clock news came on, he started getting ready for bed, And that's when he saw Brandon. So he knows for a fact, 100%, that it was after 10 o'clock. So there's absolutely no way that Brandon could have committed this crime if we knew where Brandon was at that 9:41 call. What do you think?
All right, Randy from Vancouver, Washington. I hope that this cleared things up for you a little bit more. It's great to see it out there in your face, man.
Well, maybe next time, instead of like at the board, we need to have like another segment where we go like outside or to the crime scene or something like that. Let's do some of that. That sounds fun.
Yeah, we can do that. The field trip episode.
Can you imagine the live Q&A from the crime scene? That would be awesome.
I'm in.
All right. So what we're going to do is while you read the next question, I'm going to take my time getting back over to the table. Okay.
Okay. All right. Randy from Vancouver, Washington. Thank you very much. Enjoy the murder hornets. Okay. Question number 4. The emotional trauma and panic would have slowed the perpetrators down. You'd have to allow for that in the time it took to do everything. Did the investigators ever take that into consideration? And that is Jane from Dallas.
Well, did you like the way that I just transported over here real quick?
Yes.
Like in
beam you up, Scotty.
in TV time, that was only like half a second, but that took us 10 minutes?
Something like that.
Anyways, that's a really good question. I've thought about that before. I've actually tried looking up studies and stuff like that about how much of like just this flight or, in EMS, we refer to it as a flight or fight, which is basically your adrenaline, you have a sudden rush of adrenaline, which I would imagine someone would have after just killing 2 people. So I've tried looking up studies to see how much that would slow somebody down or how much they would have to just literally sit there and think about what they just did before they could even move to do anything else. And it's been difficult to find, but if you just think about it logically, if you just did that kind of horrendous act, you're not going to be functioning at your optimum level. You're going to be kind of panicking and looking around and making sure, you know what I mean? Like, it just seems like that it would definitely add to the timing. So I don't know 100% what the technical time or whatever would be. But yeah, if you think about it logically, it's going to affect the timeline for sure.
Okay, Jane from Dallas, thank you very, very much for your question.
Thank you, Jane.
And the final question of this episode
So we have we should have like a drum roll or something.
Yeah, we should.
And the final question.
This comes from Mitzi in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Good old beautiful Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Didn't we have one from Santa Fe before?
We did.
Are we big in Santa Fe?
Somebody's talking.
Somebody's talking.
So,
nice.
Thank you, Santa Fe.
Yes.
Okay, the question is, did any of Brandon's friends go on record to describe his mood later that night? If he went out clubbing with his friends after committing the crime, did they notice a difference?
Well, yes. That is a really good question. There was only one friend that said that they noticed anything different or whatever from him. Alex and all of those guys that he was with that night said that that night when they went out, he was completely fine. It was completely normal. It was just like he always was.
What was he like that night? He seemed very normal, calm. I mean, nothing wrong with him at all. I mean, he didn't seem, like anything was going on or anything like that. He just acted like his normal self. Okay. So
there was a little bit of testimony from Robert during the trial that was saying that during one of the calls when he talked to Brandon during that 9:30 to 11 o'clock time frame, one of the calls that Brandon kind of seemed out of breath. And, I mean, it's just almost comical, it's like it could be a lot of things, especially when you're talking about all the stuff that Brandon was saying that he was doing over at the house. He was feeding the dogs, letting his bird out. He was changing the trucks because, they had a trailer there. So they were trying to keep a truck in front of the trailer so nobody would steal it. So you would think that he's going to have to like crank that thing to get it off of the hitch and then move the other truck over and recrank it down. I mean, so there's all kinds of stuff that somebody could be doing that would make them out of breath. And but he never said like which call it was. Was it the first call? Was it the last call? Was it while he was on the way? Like which call was it? So he never really said that. But that was the only thing that any of the friends said that was kind of out of the ordinary, was that Brandon was kind of out of breath during one of those calls.
Okay. Mitzi in Santa Fe, New Mexico, thank you very much. Keep doing what you're doing. We love you guys. I think that will wrap us up for this week, Scott. That's 5 questions. One of them was a phone question.
Yes.
It's good. It's good to see people using the phone again. All right. Do you have anything that you would like to close on?
No, I think that I hope that we've answered a lot of questions. I know that this episode was very technical. There's a lot of times, a lot of things to remember. Hopefully the explanation that we just did help people understand a little bit more. But, if you really think about it, if do you really think, and that's my party message, do you really think that Brandon Dale Woodruff, the 19-year-old college gay freshman, can commit all of these things that we talked about in 14 minutes? It's just and Ralph Guerrero should have known, and probably did know, I think he knew, that if he would have presented that 14 minutes to the jury, they would have said, no, you're crazy. So he had to make it out to be like it was an hour. In fact, for the Texas Justice, I interviewed 3 different jurors, and I asked every single one of them. And one of them was completely on board with Brandon still being guilty, even after I didn't really talk to her about the case that much. But when I interviewed her, she was very set in stone in her decision. But I even asked her, I said, hey, if we could prove to you that it was 14 minutes, would you still have voted guilty? And her and the other 2, all 3 of them said no. There's no way that they would have voted guilty if it was proved to them that there was only 14 minutes that Brandon had to commit this crime. So I feel like that's probably, if there's one area that, the phone calls and pointing that out to the jury was probably the one area that the defense kind of dropped the ball. But that's not a criticism of them, because there was so much going on in this trial. And, Catherine Ferguson, as we'll talk about when we get to the trial, she didn't really have a lot of time to prepare. She wasn't even supposed to really even try the case in chief. She was supposed to be there just for the constitutional violation. And some things happened personally with Jerry Spencer Davis and stuff that caused her to have to be thrust into the first chair position. But I do believe that if that would have been presented to the jury, that things would have been different.
Exactly. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, you can find out more about Brandon's case at freebrandon.org. You can also find out more about the upcoming documentary. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify. But right now, what we're pushing is the YouTube channel. The first 100 subscribers to our YouTube channel go into a drawing for a free $500 Visa gift card. So go to search out American Justice Podcast on YouTube. Subscribe, share it with all your friends so you can all listen. I'm your co-host, C. Derick Miller. You can find out more about me at cderickmiller.com. I will also be appearing on the Literary License podcast this weekend in jolly old England, good old
Nice.
London, where
Nice.
we're gonna discuss the movies Midsummer and Hereditary by awesome film director Ari Aster. I've even been told that he's going to pop on the podcast for a little while, so it's going to be really cool to speak to him. I love that guy's movies.
Are you going to
But
do
that is-
Are you going to do your British accent when you're talking to the people from England?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'll do that all the time when I'm speaking to them, and they quite like it.
I'm sure they do.
No, they don't. I'm sure it's rather offensive.
Right. Yeah, especially when you
think-
hear some of them try to do like Texas accents and stuff. It's kind of funny.
I think that was more of an Australian, actually. My British always comes out like a younger Paul McCartney. It's like, oh, look at what we're doing here. We're doing the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. I've got some questions for you.
To me, I think the Australian and British accent, the only difference between them is if you want to be Australian, you just throw in the word mate.
Mate, yeah, exactly.
That's the
All
only
right,
difference.
everybody, we hope you have a great week. Don't forget to tune in on Sunday for episode 10 of the American Justice Podcast. I don't have a Star Wars title for that. I'm sorry. They only made 9 of them.
Well, you're going to have to talk to Disney and see if you can suggest something.
I'll try my best.
All right. So don't forget, until next time, stay aware, stay strong, and get involved. See you next week.
The American Justice Podcast is owned and copyrighted by Atua Productions, LLC. Your host is Scott Pogensey, and your writer is C. Derick Miller. The theme music for the American Justice Podcast has been created and composed by Josh DeRosa. Scripted and recorded episodes are published every Sunday morning, with follow-up Q&A episodes released on Fridays. You can find the Q&A episodes on YouTube by searching for American Justice Podcast. Atua Productions aims for this to be an interactive podcast where you, the audience, has a great amount of influence on the content of our shows. You can interact with us in several ways. First, and most preferred, is you can leave us a voicemail. Our phone number is 972-942-0444. Be sure to leave your name and the city you're calling from, along with whether or not we can use your voice on the air. If Facebook is more your style, you can log on to our Facebook page at facebook.com/American Justice Podcast. Feel free to leave a comment, or you can message us on Messenger if you have a more pressing question or issue. If you would like to blog about the show, then you can log on to AmericanJusticePodcast.com and tell us what you think there. If you are a tweeter, you can also voice your opinion on Twitter at AJusticePodcast. If you would like to support the show, you can do so in a couple different ways. First, consider visiting our Patreon page at patreon.com/AJPodcast. We have different levels of support that include t-shirts, guest call-in spots, and early access to our podcast and YouTube shows. Next, you can like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get notifications of when we publish episodes. We would also very much appreciate it if you could give us a 5-star review. If you have any comments about the show, or more importantly, any tips on the case we're discussing, please call 972-942-0444 and leave us a message. After all, if the subject of our podcast is innocent, that means someone out there is guilty. American Justice Army? Let's find them.